Welcome, welcome, and always appreciate your comments and your thoughts if you care to share them. So, uh, we're going to start with the bracha, and then I'll head into our screen share. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
There it is. And in this parsha of Ki Tetze, there are really some interesting, I don't know you want to call it social commentary, but we're talking about relations between men and women and the absolute abhorrence, and I have to use that word, I'm sorry, about promiscuity. And we are dealing with all of those kinds of things at this point, and we're going to go into a new topic, at least in terms of the situation. Let's say a new situation, right? And I feel that this is sort of all based on the notion, and I put that up in my postings, as to a fundamental question, which is, what is our relationship to our own bodies? And the fact that we, at least from the Torah's perspective, we don't own them in any sense. We are custodians of our bodies, but we don't own them. And that puts a whole different light in terms of taking care of our bodies, right? If we're custodians, we're responsible to make sure that we take care of our bodies. But it doesn't mean that our bodies are just simply there for our personal pleasure. And that's the issue that, of course, comes along with these particular things. And that there's a special responsibility that goes along with being a custodian. I don't think that's going to be a popular position, but at any rate, I think there's some justification in it. On when you consider what is it to own something and what's involved in owning something, as opposed to being a custodian, since we only have it for a certain period of time, and then obviously we don't have it anymore. Nor did we ever do anything to take possession of our bodies, at least we ourselves. Anyway, new situation. Ki yimatzeh ish shochev im isha be'ulat Baal. It says, if it is found that a man is lying with a married woman, with a woman who is married, umetu gam shnehem, the two of them shall be put to death. Now, again, there is a word in here, this little word gam, that is a strange, that has halachic implications, and Rashi is going to tease that out. So they also, both of them also shall die, right? But the gam shnehem, and they shall die also, the two of them. Going on to finish the sentence. Ha'ish hashochev im ha'isha, the man who has lain with the woman, v'ha'isha, and the woman. Uvi'ata hara miYisrael, and you shall remove, right, absolutely remove the wickedness from Israel, from the people of Israel. So in here, let's go in here. Here we are. Umetu gam shnehem. So this gam, right? So the two of them, he says, lahotzi ma'aseh chidudim. Interesting. He says this does not include, when it says gam, right, this emphasis on gam, the Sifrei says that is to exclude ma'aseh chidudim, meaning unnatural gratification. So, in other words, okay, she'ein ha'isha nehenet mehem, and the reason for that is that the woman does not take pleasure from this particular type of intercourse. So, just trying to think. Okay, why it said, oh, shnehem, right? the two of them together. So the way I believe they're looking at the sins is saying that they shall die if both of them take pleasure in it. Now, would that mean that the man, in fact, if he takes pleasure in it, would be put to death? I'm not sure. They weren't eager to put people to death, and so again, we're looking at an exclusionary thing. Yes, David.
Yeah, I'm assuming it actually means, and maybe I'm wrong, I'm assuming it means that a man rapes a married woman. And so if he does that, then unless there's a different thing for that one, but that's because in that case, he might have pleasure and she wouldn't, and et cetera. Anyway.
Okay, so I am pretty certain that here we're simply talking about mutual consent.
Okay, that's where I wasn't sure if it was consensual or not. Okay, all right.
Because it's shochev im, lie with, and I think it is consensual. But they're looking for ways in which to use, first of all, the shneihem here, the two of them, seems unnecessary, right? If it says umetu, and they shall die, right? Well, who is going to die, right? If they shall die, minimum plurality is two. So why mention the two of them? Okay, so that's how the rabbis are saying the fact that this word shnehem is here is to say it has to be mutually pleasurable. Okay, so gam, and this word gam, the rabot habaim me'acharehem. However, okay, this word gam also is used always to add to something. In other words, that there's something additional in this law. And here he's saying the additional thing is habaim me'acharehem. And there's the difference between a yud and a vav, right? So habaim, to include, right, anyone who has intercourse with her after the two of them have had intercourse. In other words, this married woman, the fact that she is now in a situation where she can be accused of a capital offense might mean that that's the end of it. There is a principle in Jewish law that if you are guilty of several things and one of those things is a capital offense, they don't pile on the other things too. The fact that you have to pay with your life is considered enough to cancel out anything else. And they are this is one of those situations where law has interesting implications. At any rate, it's saying that even though she at this point is has committed a capital offense, those who have if there are people who have intercourse with her afterwards, they are equally guilty. In other words, they are equally guilty of a capital offense, and that is macharehem. Yes, go ahead.
I have from adultery. You're talking about adultery.
We are talking about adultery.
What happens to the children that are born from this adultery? They're innocent. They shouldn't be sinned on because of the parent of those people committing adultery or incest. Either one. I know a lot of women have babies out of wedlock, but that's okay. But when you have a baby out of adultery, and she's married to another man, and you have another child out of incest, that's wrong. There's something wrong with it. And the children shouldn't be, stand for it because they're innocent.
Yes, I understand. We need to finish this up a little bit and then discuss what happens if this all just comes about and the woman has already given birth to a child born of adultery. And yes, I'm sorry to say that such a child is considered a mamzer, okay? Is considered a mamzer. And the truth is, Arlen, the best I can make out of it is that we should not think of ourselves as not having implications for others. And it's not the only example in our lives where someone acts wickedly and innocent people are caught in that. and that possibly the reason things work that way maybe because it also works in the opposite direction, meaning in some ways, a righteous person can bring a lot of blessing on people who don't necessarily deserve that blessing. And on the other side of it, I think perhaps a deeper point is to let you know and to try and get your brain to get into gear and realize that there are implications to what you do and that you're going to be harming an innocent soul by doing this, by, by gratifying your lust. And we know that lust is a very powerful, powerful, powerful motivating factor, emotion. And how do you overcome that? Well, possibly by thinking about it. Now, we have Sfarim Acherim. Here we had Acharehem, which we understood meant anyone who has intercourse with her afterwards, okay, with this married woman. So Sfarim Acherim, other manuscripts, change this little yud and read it as a vav. Me'achorehem. Me'achorehem would mean essentially anal intercourse. I believe that's what it's talking about. So Maseh Chidui, okay, somebody's going to need to mute. Unnatural gratification, of course, includes a lot of things, right? But it's saying here that even though we're saying in this particular case, we're saying the death penalty is not instituted, right? Because there's no pleasure for this married woman in this case. Nevertheless, we exclude this particular situation of anal intercourse. Okay, let's go on. And this is going to, and then if there's a question, please feel free. So, davar acher, another interpretation. Gam shnehem. Why do we use this word gam shnehem? The two of them also. What's the also? What's it including? The rabot et havlad. That is to include the unborn child is what it means here, the fetus. She'im haita me'uberet, right? If she was in fact pregnant, ein mamtinin la ad sheteled. They do not wait to exercise the capital punishment until she gives birth. So, the takeaway for me, and of course this is all not, there's difficult stuff. Anyone who says, oh, religion is there as a sort of palliative so that you don't, it just makes life so easy and it's got all the easy answers. This is such clear evidence that it's not the case. I think this is part of struggling with the Torah, but struggling to understand the Torah's greatness and at the same time to try and find a way of understanding it. And at times perhaps even saying, look, I don't understand it at this point. I don't have enough information. The truth is we really don't have enough information. On this page, okay, which is just a tiny little speck more, look at all this other stuff to go through, all this other material that we are not going to touch and haven't touched, and we're just beginning. But the truth is, it's saying, the takeaway also is saying, precisely because we tend to look at this in a very, very casual way, the Torah is saying this is not a casual thing. We cannot afford to look at it casually, and there are unfortunate ramifications, to put it mildly, if one looks at this and doesn't see intimacy of this kind, right, as being an incredible act, an incredible opportunity, and a very powerful, powerful factor. And of course, I've mentioned this before, but I think that two things that are still have deep psychological implications are both sex and death. Those are two things that affect people very, very deeply emotionally, and that essentially neuroses, what one can call neuroses, tend to have some connection with one of these two factors. Yes, David.
Yeah, but I think we read it previously, and I'm assuming it applies in this case. There has to be like a lot of proof, right? I'm assuming that, again, you know, this sounds very bad, but it's the end result of like you've been given a bunch of chances, before this actually happens, right? I mean, you have to be warned, people have to see you. It's
Right.
not like the
Correct.
cases we see sometimes today where somebody says, you've committed adultery and there's no real proof, and then people suffer as a result of that, right? I mean, that's not what we're talking about. We're
That
talking
is
about,
correct. That is
yeah,
correct. Look,
okay.
yes, and thank you for underlining that. Yes, that when it comes to the actual application of these things, there are all kinds of safeguards that are thrown into the process, and hopefully, if we get to do, if we get to in fact read some Torah Tamima, we'll get to see a little bit of that. But
I think I'm sorry.
that's
I think the word that's the most important in this little section is they're found.
yes, yes, right.
And I believe found as really somebody was walked in on them, or they were in the public place or something,
Right. Well,
Right.
again, they're going to have to, the oral law is going to have to discuss what do we mean by that word that they were found. What does the Torah mean? But what I was going to say is that the purpose of the Torah is to teach us. This isn't applied law that we're talking about. We're talking about raising our level of consciousness. That's what the Torah is trying to do. And whether or not we are willing to have our consciousness raised is going to be up to us. But why would we assume that having our consciousness raised is an easy process, whether intellectually or emotionally? And this is such a beautiful example of both the intellectual and especially the emotional challenge in raising our level of consciousness. And by the way, it's also a beautiful example of why Abraham is called the Ivri, Abraham the Hebrew, and the understanding of Ivri is understood midrashically as him standing on one side of the river and other people standing on the other side of the river, having to do with a sense of isolation. I'm trying to think of the word exactly that I want to think of. Maybe it'll come to me, uh, but he feels, that your values, right, that your values aren't the values of other people, and the values of other people aren't your values, and it makes you feel very, separated out. And let's be honest about it. Again, would the Torah be saying this stuff if people acted naturally in this regard? It requires raising your level of consciousness. Going on. All right, that is essentially, that's it for this particular little piece here. We're going on. New idea. This is a paragraph, right? Ki ye na'ara betula. In a case of a girl who is a young maiden, na'ara, we've dealt with this quite a bit yesterday, betula, who is a virgin maiden. Me'orasa, and here comes the issue. She is betrothed, leish, to a man. So she's not all by herself. She has a relationship. She has a commitment, a serious commitment to be married to a certain man, to an individual. Umitza'a ish ba'ir, and a man finds her in the city, v'shachav ima, and lay with her. And again, we've got the shachav, shochev, right? So she lies with her, and he lies with her. And again, Rashi's going to tease this out because we're going to see the fact that they're talking about an ear, they're going to talk about sadeh, a field, a place where there aren't people. And the idea of a town means there are people in the proximity of where this is taking place. Umitza'a ish ba'ir, man found her in the town. And this is from Tractate Arachin, page 7. Lefichach shachav ima. Okay. And for this reason, he lay with her. In other words, she was making herself available. She was putting herself out. And this is a saying that they have, Patsa Kor'a Laganav. Literally, it means the breach, like a breach in a wall, you understand, cries out to the thief, right? So the thief isn't a good person, right? This is the situation. They're both responsible, right? On the one hand, we've got the breach, and on the other hand, in the wall, somebody hasn't taken precautions and made this stuff available for people to help themselves, right? And this cries out to the thief. Ha'ilu yashva beveta. So had she remained in her home, in other words, but of course, our culture is different, okay? We just have to take this into account, okay? Lo irala, this wouldn't have happened to her. So she's getting around a lot, heading for the bar territory, may I say, right? And that's why this happened. But she's betrothed. She's betrothed. Incidentally, the Torah seems, at least to this point, has been relatively silent about the case of where neither of these people, where the woman is not betrothed. But of course, she runs the risk of no longer being a virgin. It's a different kind of thing. At any rate, here we're
What
talking.
about forcing by rape, Rabbi? That woman could be forced to do these things.
They would have to, yes, they would have to investigate. That would be part of the trial, Harlan. But here, there's a sense that this is totally mutual, okay? That she was
He's reading ahead again.
Sorry?
He's reading ahead again. It's
Yeah,
coming. It's coming, Harlan.
It is coming. I know. Okay, so let's keep going. All right, again, right? This is pretty bad. V'hotzetem et shnehem el shar ha'ir ha'i. You shall take both of them out, both of them, by the way, to the gate of that city. Uskaltem otam ba'avanim, and they shall be stoned with stones, v'ametu, to the point that they die. Et hana'ara, and why is the maiden included? Al davar asher lot sa'aka ba'ir, in the fact that she did not cry out, in other words, to be helped in the city. In other words, please understand, we have to be so careful about not taking these words too literally, okay? The point is that if the court were to find evidence that she did this unwillingly, she would not be killed, okay? What they're saying here is that there has to be clear evidence, okay, there is to be evidence that she did this willingly, and the fact that there were people around and she could have cried out and stopped this from happening and didn't do it, okay? All right. The et ha'ish, and the man as well. Why? Al davar asher ina et eshet re'eu, for the reason that he violated the wife of his neighbor. And again, you shall remove the evil from your midst. Let's see if there's, okay. We're going to go on. I'm going to keep going a little bit more. I just want to make sure I've covered all the Rashis. Ve'im basadeh yimtza ha'ish et hana'ara. But if the man finds this woman, comes upon this woman in the field, hana'ara morsa, this betrothed woman, ve'hechezik baha'ish, and the man took hold of her, ve'shachav ima, and lay with her. So there is the implication of forcible, that this is a situation of rape. Umet ha'ish asher shachav ima levado. The man who lay with her shall die, be put to death alone. He alone will be put to death. V'la na'ara, but regards the maiden, lo ta'aseh davar. You shall not do, literally it might say, you shall not lay a finger on her. You shall not do anything. Ein la na'ara chet mavet. This young woman is not, this maiden is not guilty of a capital offense. And now the Torah goes into some interesting side conversation here, and there are a lot of implications of this. Ki ka'asher, this is a situation the Torah is comparing it to. Just as a man, yakum ish al rehu uritzacho nefesh. It's similar to a situation where a man rises against his neighbor and kills him, right? Murders him. Kain hadavar hazeh. This is the situation. This is similar to this situation. Ki basadeh metza'ah, because he found her in the open field. The assumption is tza'aka hana'ara hama'orasa. This betrothed maiden cried out for help. Ve'ein moshi'ala, and there was none to help her. So, really sort of pulling apart stuff. Now, let's take a look at the Rashi. Ki ka'asher yakum, right? This really unusual and interesting verse. Lefi pshuto zehu mashmao. So he says, according to the straightforward understanding of this verse, this is the implication. Ki anusahi, because she is forced. She is been forcibly raped. Uvechazaka amad aleha, and he stood against her. He forced her. He used force against her. Ka'adam ha'omed al chaveiro lahago. It's no different than a person who stands up against his neighbor to kill him. That's in Psachim, etc. Which I think is, such an interesting way to describe the situation of rape and how it's compared directly to murder. V'rabotenu darshu bo, and our rabbis again made a drash. This is not the plain and simple meaning of the text. This hare ze ba lelamed, behold, this comes to teach, v'nimtza lamed, and as a result, we learn something about this too. And what I looked up, what Rashi doesn't tell us, but I checked in looking at Sefaria. Sefaria gives the reference. And the issue is that the fact that the Torah talks about the fact that she called for someone to prevent this from happening, and there wasn't anyone there to do this. And in a combination of situations, the Torah basically learns that in a situation where you see A in a process of killing B, that if it's a matter of taking the life of A in order to prevent B from being killed, if that's what you have to do it, you can do it. You are not guilty of murder. And that's what you're learning about the verse that talks about a man standing up against his neighbor to murder him, right? That you're allowed to take whatever steps you need to prevent that from happening. Now, I'm leaving out some different verses that are seen, okay? Partially because there's a principle that if someone wants to kill you, and the only way you can defend yourself is by killing that person, you have that right. You are not legally guilty of murder for that, or manslaughter for that matter either, unless, of course, they can show that you could have not prevented this, etc. I mean, there are a lot of pieces to unfold here, but essentially that's what the rabbis take a look at, this combination of verses here. And with this, I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to stop the recording.